Are you coming to the tree where they strung up a man? They say murder three. Strange things that happen here. How stranger would it be if we met at midnight in the hanging tree?
Coffee. Without it, we would never have had the Industrial Revolution. We'd all be still living in Europe in mud huts. Here in Laredo, we have the Organic Man Coffee Trike. 4501 McPherson, the best coffee on the planet. If you can't get to Laredo, you can order from the Organic Man Coffee Trike.shop. Welcome to Something Different with Chris James. This is not going to be the show Strange Things. Instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to read one of my books. This book. It's called The Bag Company. When I wrote it, I did not set out to write a bunch of books about a 17-year-old girl, but if you know anything about writing, sometimes books just write themselves, and I wound up creating a character that I just couldn't get rid of. So, for the next hour approximately, I'm going to be reading to y'all from this book. If you enjoy listening to this story, give me a thumbs up and a good comment or something, and I'll read the next part of the book. If I don't get any comments, well, you'll just have to go buy the book yourselves if you want to hear the end of it. Or not. To begin with, the demon. Have you ever heard the sage advice that went, if you don't understand Latin, don't read it out loud? This very good advice is written down in easy to understand English on page 14 of the extremely informative tome called The B-Movie Survival Guide, lovingly put down on paper by Gary Cook, Debbie Rochin, and Peter Smidge. It's available for $9.95 at Amazon.com, or less, or maybe from a used bookstore, or for free if you can borrow it or steal it from your friend. It's up to you. This is good advice had it been taken. Otherwise, it's just a bunch of words drifting on the wind unheeded. Bob Newman had found the old book in a cardboard box under a pile of trash, under a bigger pile of discarded household items in the dump out beyond the edge of town. The words were pretty much meaningless to him or his cohorts. They all shared a dislike of anything educational or enlightening or historical. You could say they were just a bunch of schoolish twits. Hey, maybe we can sell it to a used bookstore, Drake, one of the buds, had suggested. Or better, drop it off an overpass onto a car in the middle of the night. The book was quite large, weighing in at about 18 pounds, measuring 24 by 18. Juan was fond of dropping things from bridges, usually turkey giblets. The cover was some kind of a leathery-looking stuff, probably goat or cow, and it was worn-looking. Opening the old and musty tome, Bob quickly discovered he had no idea what was written on its many pages. "What does it say?" asked one of the other non-educational bumpkins. "It says, stultus non pelogo hoc," whatever that means. If Bob had paid more attention in the Latin class that he'd been offered but not taken, he would have known it said, "Idiot, don't read this book." "So what should we do? Sell it or drop it on a car?" "I say let's read some more. It sounds cool." Bob thought big words sounded cool no matter what language they were in. Flipping over to the next page, he was thrilled to see an illustration. Oh, look, it's got pictures. He held the book upside down so his fellow intellectually challenged boobs could take in the ancient-looking drawing. The illustration showed a group of men. They must be men. They all had beards. Or maybe they were just hairy women. Anyway, they were shown standing in a circle around what must be a bonfire. Hey, it looks like they're having a cookout. Not a bad idea. It's kind of cold out here. I'm going to start a fire. This would be far beyond this young cretin's ability, if not for the giant can of lighter fluid he had brought along for just such a purpose. There was plenty of wood since this was a dump. It took him less time to start a raging fire than it would take him to fill out a job application. Hey, you know what would be cool? Let's stand around the fire like those guys in the picture. This sounded like an extraordinarily bad idea, but bad ideas were the only kind Milton had. They positioned themselves in a circle around a now smoking, burning, smelly pile of wood, taking up positions just like the book illustration showed them. What they lacked in thought process, they made up for in being able to recreate a picture. Bob went on with the reading, if that was indeed what he was doing. It had as much to do with reading as a parrot's being able to reason out what it was saying. Actually, some parrots held a far better reasoning ability than the combined IQ of 5 of the 6 doofuses in the dump. If these fine, upstanding examples of what not to be had spent the night at the local coffee shop drinking espresso and contemplating the meaning of life instead of guzzling beer and contemplating the meaning of words they didn't understand, they would have taken on a much rosier hue. You know what this reminds me of? One of those horror movies, where some monster turns up and kills everyone. This not-too-bright statement came from Waldo, a new member of the Ignoramus Club. He hung around because these were the only guys that would put up with his nonsense. He was what you might call a nerd. Look, there's another picture, only this one looks kind of scary. Indeed it did. It showed the men standing around the fire had conjured up some unthinkable creature from another dimension. A very nasty one at that. Wow, that looks just like that thing over there. Chapter 2. Pamela Bogus. The sunlight was coming through the bedroom window, bringing a new day into focus. It shone on the dresser, covered with all the latest and greatest makeup available from the mall, from lip gloss the exact shade of the sunbeam to a bright green eyeliner that had been so popular for 4 whole days. The sunlight crawled across the room, lighting up the desktop covered with paperwork, already sweated over, retyped, re-retyped again, turned in, graded, and returned. Formerly the most important thing in life, now just paper waiting to be dealt with in its final hour. The sunlight wasn't about to stop there. It scrolled across the room, looking for the bed, which looked more like a mound of discarded clothing. Having reached its destination, the light sought out the sole inhabitant, ensconced somewhere in the depths of the cottony tomb. The mound moved, as if under some kind of semi-intelligent control. A sound escaped from the interior. From outside the domain of teenage Longer, called as if from a less untidy dimension, came the sound of an adult voice. "Pam, time to get up. You don't want to be late for your first day at work." There was no response from the huddled mass. The door to the teen territory swung open, giving the Mother, a clear shot at her siblings' slumbering shape. Get up now. You've already missed breakfast. You'll have to grab something at work. Now let's go. Uncle Ray was nice enough to give you a job, so let's move it before you're eligible for Social Security. The bedclothing moved back, allowing a single extremity to venture forth, as if unsure of the safety of the surrounding arena. You have 5 minutes to get dressed and get going, the mother, better known as Mom, or Procreator, sometimes the Creator, her friends called her Paula, walked over and peeled back a few layers of blankets and sheets, till the pajama-clad form of her youngest and oldest, well, her only daughter, came into view. Better put on something besides what you're wearing. You can't show up dressed like that. Pamela had gone to school on more than one occasion dressed in her pajamas and winter coat. The fuzzy house shoes barely survived the last trip. Unable to resist the call of the mother, Pam pulled herself across the mattress. When one leg was dangling from the edge, she levered her body upwards, nearly falling from the mattress. The mother continued, "You have to dress for business. Something nice, like a dress and heels." Jeans and t-shirt escaped from the partially opened mouth. A dress and shoes. Your uncle runs a business, not a playground. This just wasn't fair. A summer vacation had arrived. Pam had survived 3 years of high school. She was an adult, kind of. Why couldn't she just lounge around the house and watch TV or text her friends? It was some kind of a conspiracy between her mother and father. Teach her some responsibility, they had said. Give her some experience, they had said. Earn her own money for a change, they had said. So here she was, about to go to work. This isn't fair. Pam stumbled to her closet to see about a costume to appear at a place of employment. The car was sitting in the driveway. It was in need of a bit of work, but it was her car. Ever since her parents had gone to see some guy named Dave something, they had been on this thing about money. Act your wage, and don't spend money you don't have, was the common theme around the house lately. They had performed some kind of a bizarre ritual in the kitchen. It was called plastic surgery. They had cut up all their credit cards. Hers were sacrificed to the scissors as well. Nothing had weathered the storm of card cutting except her ATM. But with little actual cash in the bank, as she was now forced to get a job. Oh, the humiliation of it all. Her car, a 1980 Malibu, which had cost all of $2,007.19, had an AM/FM radio, and that was it. No CD, no auxiliary input, nothing. The only thing to listen to as she drove was a radio. All her friends were sporting brand new cars with everything. Her dad had said, Dave said we should pay cash from now on, so this will have to do until you can pay cash for your new one. Climbing in, Pam fired up her chariot and headed away. Away to a new chapter in her life, something called work. It wasn't as if her folks didn't have lots of money. It had been mostly in the form of credit, but wasn't that the same thing? Sure, a new car cost a lot of money, but that's what banks were for. You walk in and sign some papers, and it was free money, right? Pam's car ran all right, no smoking or dripping, but it didn't have any zip, and people stared. Or rather, they seemed to ignore her, as if her and her car were not there. Checking her watch, the clock on the dash was running, but all the hands were going around in the wrong direction. It was time she was at work. Better step on it. The place of unemployment for a 17-year-old with zero experience on this side of the street, way over in the less than upscale part of town. The building had been an old mansion at one time, a long time ago. A long, long time ago. Way back when some guy named McKinley was the president. This had been a fine example of overspending. 3 stories with a huge something out back. There were some windows missing from the 3rd floor. Not just the glass, but the whole window, frame and all. A huge hole was all that was left of where windows should have been. The yard had been turned into a parking lot. Too bad it was mostly dirt. You could see where the stripes would have been by the weeds growing between the cars. Several statues were occupying the front yard. Most were missing parts. Pigeon poo was the dominant color. A sign hung from the archway over the front porch. It said, "The Bag Company." In tiny letters along the bottom was written, "The Bogus Anomalous Group, Inc." This was her uncle's business. What in the world is an anomalous? Pam would have to look it up one day. The front door stood open, just a bit, and it looked anything but inviting. This was the scene in the horror movie where the heroine makes a stupid move like going inside. Flipping a mental coin, either step through the door or jump in the car and drive to another state, change her name, and then what? I guess I go in then. Pam walked to the door and stepped inside. She pushed the door shut, but it only swung part way and then stopped, prevented from closing by the frame that had warped. The curtains hanging on both sides of the door were lace and spiderweb, gray with dust from the last century or so. The foyer had been converted into a reception area, kind of. There was a desk, old and solid, made from a few trees, and a few mismatched chairs, one of which was occupied by a man in short pants and a t-shirt. It was a bit warm in here. He looked to be about half awake, but Pam was unsure of which half. The desk was fairly neat. A phone, a pen set, some papers, and an in and out box. Behind the desk sat a huge bookshelf full of old leather-bound tomes. A fan sat in the corner, stirring up the dust and making pages flutter as it rotated by the inbox. The man snored loudly and then woke to his own trumpeting call. "Huh? What? Sorry. Is the healer ready for me yet?" He looked at Pam as if she possessed some kind of an answer to his question. Healer? Like as in, you have a... She ran out of stammerings. As the two stared at each other, a short, round woman came flowing from down the central hall, just to the right of the desk. She was close to 5 feet tall and nearly as wide. Her dress was all blue from her neck to her feet, that just didn't quite seem to touch the floor. On her head sat a blue scarf, making her resemble a small mountain of blue silk. "Roger! Sorry to keep you waiting. I was clearing myself. A bit of a wing-ding last night." The woman looked at Pam. "You must be the new receptionist. Ray will be along in a minute. Have a seat. Roger, come with me. Let's see if we can clear your energy." The blue lady led Roger away back down the hallway behind the reception desk. Pam watched to see if the woman was actually floating or not. It was hard to say. Shortly, a door opened to the left side of the room. Her uncle came walking in, a cup of coffee in his hand. Ah, Pam, I thought you weren't going to make it. He didn't look at his watch, but the implication was there. Sorry, I overslept. A long night last night working on a. There were no projects due for class, no homework was needed. There was just no way to get over the fact that she had stayed up watching TV and talking on the phone. Her uncle forged ahead. Come with me, I'll get you started. He led her as far as the desk, pointing to the office chair, left over from last century. This'll be your desk. It's a bit old, but it gets the job done. He preferred the seat to her. Pam sat down at the desk, finding the chair was not too uncomfortable. The last occupant had left quite a dent in the sitter-downer section. She surveyed her surroundings. Her uncle gave her a tour of the desktop. You have a phone and a pen. If somebody calls, take a note and see to it it gets to the proper party. The phone had a round dial with numbers on it, some kind of a retro-looking device. The phone is probably older than you are, but it works, which is a good thing. Something about the energy around here makes electronics go kaputski. He pointed at the shelf by the front door where a number of cell phones sat. It doesn't damage them, it just makes them do odd things. Odd things. Pam figured her uncle was just being old-fashioned or something. He continued. Behind you is a small reference library. You'll get a lot of use out of it. Consider it your best friend to find things. Why not just use a computer? Remember, odd things. Odd things. Besides, some of the things you'll be looking for won't be found on any computer. He looked as if there was more he wanted to say. To your left is a status board, tells you who's in or out. Now, there was a blackboard with names written in chalk. Beside each name was a paper arrow taped in place. It lets you know who's around. Around the office. Yes, around. He was about to say more, but instead he looked at his cup. Right. Coffee time. Come, I'll show you our coffee shop. He pointed at the door he'd come through just a bit ago. The door was solid wood and very wide. There was a window positioned above the door, allowing some cross ventilation. The window swung open from the top. Our staff spent so much time at the coffee shop, drinking and talking and drinking, we decided to put in our own. What exactly is it you and your staff do here? Pam had been wondering about this for, say, the last 10 years. Whenever the subject of her uncle came up, there had always been a long pause, followed by a change of subject. We fix things. No, we solve problems. Come, have a cup of joe and I'll fill you in. As best I can. Yes, as best I can. The coffee shop was located in what had been and still was the library. The real library, not to be mistaken for the books behind the receptionist's desk. The walls were covered from floor to ceiling. The 20-foot high ceiling with shelves full of books from all over the planet. Some so big it would take more than one person to lift them down, others so old you might not want to lift them at all. Scattered about the shelves were ladders on wheels that could be moved about, allowing access to the books. The floor space was occupied by several round tables with chairs that didn't even try to match. The corners had big round-looking chairs for reading or sleeping, depending on the person in them. Along one side ran a coffee bar, with anything and everything coffee-related around it. A youngish-looking woman sat in one corner, a mirror held up in front of her face. She might have been asleep, except the coffee cup in her hand would rise up and disappear to her lips, presumably, and then descend to balance on one knee. Just about every empty space had a coffee cup or two left sitting, waiting for rescue and washing. Pamela, this is Eddie Chavez. Everybody calls him Techno. If you have any problems with electronic devices, he's the man to see. Eddie smiled at the newest member of the staff. Just don't bring it in here. I'll get it from you by the front door and fix it outside. We have weird electronic issues here. He already knew Pam was the boss's niece. Everybody knew. It was near impossible to keep secrets. Eddie is the barista here. He runs the coffee shop and he does odd jobs if needed. Pam looked at her uncle. So what odd jobs do you do? She felt as if she was going to be working here. She really ought to know what was going on. My great-great-grandfather, who would be your great-great-great-grandfather. Too many greats. That guy started this business back in 1901 when he discovered he needed some place to put his eldest daughter. She was different. And people were beginning to talk. Why isn't she married? And why isn't she in a convent somewhere? Now, that kind of thing. Yes, a convent. Ray looked at Pam as if hoping she understood so he wouldn't have to go into details. So she was different? Yes, she knew things that she shouldn't. Things she shouldn't. This isn't telling me anything. Pam was still confused. Do you know who Edgar Casey was? Was he the baseball player? No, that was the mighty Casey. Anyway, Edgar Casey was known as the sleeping prophet. He would place himself into a trance and diagnose people's health issues. He was quite good at it, but he couldn't remember any of his readings. So what good could that be? He had a secretary that wrote down all of his utterances. She kept a record of everything he said while under the trance. Yeah, the trance. Eddie slid a book across the counter. This might help. It's a book called There Is a River. It's about Edgar Casey's life. The book was kind of substantial. 453 pages, bound in leather with a weird picture impressed into the cover. So your great-grandfather was a psychic. But no, his kid was gifted. That guy didn't believe in that kind of thing. Ray gave her the try to understand look. Anyway, he had her consigned to the top floor. Anything she needed, she would get up there. Almost a whisper as he pointed at the ceiling. That's just weird. Pam had decided her uncle's family was all nuts. Then she thought, seeing as he was her uncle, and that made him her family, was being crazy contagious or hereditary? When my great-great-grandfather died trying to sail a balloon around the world, my great-great-mother, the woman in the attic, was free to do as she pleased. There was nobody here to keep her locked away, as it were. She found a suitable guy and they got hitched and had some kids. She also surrounded herself with those with special talents: artists, psychics, healers, sixth sensors, astrologers, those kind of folks. Crazy people. Pam was quite worried now. Not crazy, just different. Talented in ways others just don't understand. Ray was wondering if doing his brother a favor was such a good idea now. They stood at the coffee bar staring at nothing for a bit. Pam noticed a woman sitting in the corner, one elbow resting on the bar, her head held up by her hand. The bar around her looked clean enough, but something just wasn't right. Perhaps it was the spider webs strung from her arm to the bar, or the layer of dust on the woman's dress. An ashtray sat in front of her, a fully burned stub sticking from one of the notches. Her coffee cup had things floating in it. What the heck is she supposed to be? Pam just couldn't help but nearly shout. That would be Wanda Murkowski, the thinker. She's trying to come to a conclusion about something. How long has it been now? This last was addressed to Eddie. Maybe 6 years now, give or take a few months. Eddie ran a coffee-stained rag along the bar to erase any traces of spilt beverage. As she made a sound last month like she was getting close, but then she settled back down. Pam was aghast. She hasn't moved in over 6 years? Give or take a few months. Ray tried to steer the conversation to a different corner. You can check out any of these books you like. Just be sure to let Eddie know which one and when you'll be done, as in done. Eddie held up a lined tablet with names and books and people that had them. The conversation went back into neutral. If you're hungry, we have a fine assortment of pastries and small sandwiches. Beats having to eat around here. The neighborhood was home to several fast food restaurants, if hot grease and imitation meat could be considered food. The mention of food got Pam to thinking, as she had missed breakfast. I could use something to eat, something light, maybe a sandwich or 3. Eddie pulled several small triangular things from a display case and artistically piled them on a paper plate. As hungry as Pam was, she hardly considered their contents as she wolfed down the kind of old, kind of crusty snacks. Come with me, I'll show you the rest of our place. Ray led Pam out the door and towards the rear of the mansion. As they walked along the hall, they passed several doors, mostly closed. Never open a door without knocking first. You don't want to disturb a guest in the process of being serviced? Yes, being serviced will work. He was mostly talking to himself. They passed one door that was partway open, allowing Pam to see the woman in blue, waving her hands in the air all around a man that she had called Roger. The man was laying on a massage table, a look of contentment on his face. Ray saw her looking in. After a moment, he waved her away to the stairs leading up. They were right next to the desk she would soon be referring to as hers. The downstairs had a door which was closed. The door had a wood beam secured across it to be sure it stayed closed. This door sat on the other side of the hallway from the soon-to-be her desk. That would be Cassandra Blavatsky, our healer. She's one of our best workers. She's a healer? Dressed in blue, like she's a blue healer? Pam laughed at her own joke. Ray, on the other hand, looked confused. Get it? She's a blue healer? You don't get it, do you? After thinking about it, Ray said, "We'll head on up and see who's working on something interesting. Something interesting." Here on the second floor, you'll find the brain workers. Cassandra works with her hands. She moves around a lot and she produces some good results, so she has her office downstairs. Down there. He pointed down the stairs. Up here, we have the folks that need to sit and think a lot. Ray knocked on one door, and when there was no answer, he opened it, but found nobody home. He tried the next door and heard a voice. It sounded like it said, "Come in." Opening the door, Pam saw a woman sitting at a table, looking at a field of cards spread across the green felt top. The table was actually a poker table, but cards were cards. This is Madam Dingus. She reads cards. How's it going today, madam?" She scowled at the cards for a bit and then said, "They're being mysterious today. I need more time." We'll let you get back to it then." Ray ushered Pam out the door and closed it behind him. The next room over had a door wide open. From the hall, Pam could see a table with 4 people sitting around it as if the very existence of the planet were at stake. 3 looked to be scientists by their white lab coats and clipboards. They were crowded together on one side of the table, watching the 4th occupant and writing notes that only they could understand. The subject of their scientificking was a young boy about 5 feet tall with strawberry blonde hair that needed combing. He sat with all the calm, relaxed composure of any 10-year-old with better things to do than sit. One of the scientists pulled a card from the deck as if performing a magic trick. The young boy didn't hesitate. "Wavy lines." He looked thrilled by his announcement in a voice that could be heard in the next building over. All 3 scientists quickly wrote on their clipboards, far longer than the pronouncement had taken. Another card appeared in the man's hands. "It's a star," he proclaimed. The boy looked quite pleased with himself. A woman who sat in the corner, looking very much like the 10-year-old's mother. "Now, Grant, remember. Now, Garrett, remember to use your inside voice." "This is my insider voice," he yelled. The 3 scientists were in a mumbled discussion. Then the one in the middle, the card guy, said, "This is the most amazing activity I've ever seen. We should get back to the lab and write up these results." The scientist to his right gave the card guy a look. "You're not pulling that stunt again, running off and writing a book about our discoveries and forgetting to give us any credit?" He turned his back to his fellow lab-coated man of science. "Oh, so what about me? You seem to forget. I'm the part of this team as well, and it was my idea in the first place." This from the scientist on the left. The card guy came to his own defense. "You're just jealous because I'm the one everyone asks to speak to at conferences." While all this bickering was going on, Garrett slipped from his chair and wandered over to where Pam and Ray stood watching. "Hi, my name is Garrett Clark. I'm batting 100% again, like always." His voice was anything but subtle. The mother popped up from her corner. "Now, Garrett, let's not be too forward." She smiled at Pam. "My name is Jolene Clark, and that's my youngest, Garrett. He has quite a knack for guessing what the card is being held up." The boy rolled his eyes. "I'm not guessing. I see the card in my head." His expression said he'd explained this too many times already. "Well, whatever. He can get the card right every time, no matter what." As she looked very pleased with her boy. Pam looked at the boy and then the three scientists that were now all giving each other the cold shoulder effect, standing in a circle with their backs to each other, flipping through their respective clipboard notes, as if there was some hidden secret there, acting as if they were alone in the room. She then looked at Jolene. "Oh, wow, he must come in handy when you lose your car keys." Jolene gave a lost look for just a second. "Well, he can only do this trick with the Zener cards." "Mom, it's not a trick, it's psychical stuff." Now he was in a huff as well. The room grew a bit colder there for a second. Ray spoke up. Right, let's get on with the tour. You boys behave. No more fistfights like last time." He gave the three scientists the look. "Mrs. Clark, as always, it's a pleasure to have you two with us, us being here." He pulled Pam out the door and closed it. From inside, she could hear the silence that everyone ignored each other with a vengeance. Pam asked, "So what's that all about?" "Garrett can read the cards even though he only sees the back each time. However, it's just about the only psychic ability we've found so far. Yes, just that. He can't predict the winning number in the lottery? Not even one number. Is he good at poker? Loses every time. Can he navigate through a dark forest? He gets lost in a 10 by 10 foot room." "What the heck good is his ability then?" Ray stood silent for a bit, and then he said, "Right, let's get on with the tour." He pointed out the bathroom and the closet. The rest of the second floor was empty today. Tomorrow it might be raging with people, but today it was a graveyard, sort of. The third floor is where the quiet ones hang out. They need their solitude. We can take a peek, but don't say anything to anyone. Yes, anyone." Ray walked up the stairs, looking for a partway open door. Behind one half-closed door sat a man cross-legged on the floor, in what looked like a diaper. A large blue turban adorned his head. The room was thick with incense. "I think that guy's asleep." Pam wondered why he was dressed in a diaper. "Why is he wearing a—" "That's not a diaper, it's a dhoti. It's from India, and it's kind of, it looks like a diaper, but don't call it that. Just don't call it a diaper." Ray thought about it. Why did he dress like that? Oh well, some psychics wanted to advertise their psychicness. The rest of the third floor was devoid of occupants, empty rooms waiting for those in need of solitude. Back down in the reception area, Ray led Pam over to the desk. "From 9 till 5, I'll ask you to be somewhere in this area. Answer the phone, take notes for people. When the staff, yes, the staff, when the staff come in the morning, they'll check with you and let you know they're in. Just jot down whatever information for whatever staff and see to it gets delivered when possible, when it's possible." Pam sat down behind the huge wooden fortress and looked like a desk and tried to look professional. Do I need to type anything or make files?" Ray looked at her, wondering if she should do any of these things. There's a typewriter on the shelf to your right. If you want to, you could type up a report on stuff. Yeah, psychic stuff." Pam looked in the direction his finger was pointing. There on the shelf sat a huge gray thing with some kind of an ancient keyboard. Where the screen should be sat a round cylinder with black sticky stuff all over it. Looking closer, Pam could see a spider was busy building a web inside this antiquated device of manuscripting. As Pam looked at this strange writing machine, her cell phone began to ring. answering it without glancing at the caller ID, as she held it to her ear and heard, "Houston, we have a problem," followed by, "This is Houston. Say again, please." What the heck? She must be catching some bleed over from another person's phone. Ray saw the look of consternation. Trouble with your phone. Remember, I said odd things. You're probably picking up a call from sometime in the past or maybe the future. Maybe another dimension. Odd things, yes, very odd things. Pam looked at the caller ID. It said Apollo 13, 4/11/70. Wait, that was just a movie, right? Ray looked over her shoulder. It was a movie, but it was based on real life events. Sometimes you'll get calls like that. Some kind of time loop thingy. He scratched his head. Get Techno to have a look. Otherwise, you'll be getting calls from all over time. Yes, all over time. The phone on the desk began to ring, with a real ringing sound ring, like it had a bell. Ray looked at Pam and then pointed to the phone. Lifting the handset, she started and then stopped. What do I say? This is the bag company. How may we help you? This is the bag. What do you want? Ray cringed. I need your help. We unleashed a demon from the dark side. It's about to destroy the earth. She thought the voice sounded familiar. Is that you, Bob? You're not very funny. Try calling 911. I did. They said to call you guys. Pam, what are you doing answering the phone? I need the... The line went dead. It was a prank call from one of my classmates, or actually a former classmate. He dropped out. Pam looked at Ray for any kind of acknowledgement. Ray thought a second. Make a note of that. He might just get Mr. Armstrong to check it out. What's a Mr. Armstrong? He's our semi-licensed private eye. He does odd jobs, too. Ray wasn't sure how to describe Nathan Armstrong. A problem solver? Maybe that was his job description. Anyway, things to do, people to see. If you need anything, just call. Just call any of the staff. Yes, the staff. They should be able to help. Oh, and don't let any of the customers, the customers wander around by themselves. They might open the wrong door. Yes, the wrong door. And with that, Ray Bogus slipped out the door en route to some meeting or other. Pam hardly had time to say, wait, when the phone rang again. This is the bag company. How can we help? Pam sat back to catch her thoughts. It had been a busy day so far, and it was only 2:30. From the corner of her eye, she saw a shadow, a movement. Someone had come in from the kitchen. Turning, there was no one there, but the shadow moved across the wall. There was no one around to cast it. She blinked, and then blinked hard and fast. The shadow moved across the reception area and slipped out the door. Darn cat. Pam continued to stare after the departed shadow, only snapping out of it when the phone rang. Huh? What? Oh, yes. This is the bag company. What? No. How can we help you? Hi. This is Stanley. I need to see Cassandra right away. Pam ran the number through her mental library. Cassandra. Cassandra Peterson? No. Cassandra Blavatsky, the healer, or the blue healer. You mean Miss Blavatsky, the healer? Pam checked the status board. An upwards turned arrow showed she was in. Yes, she's in. Would you like an appointment? The line went dead. Hello? Pam set the receiver back in the ancient cradle just seconds before the door sprang open and a tall, thin, pot-bellied man came hurtling through it. His comb-over was flopping over the wrong way. "Where is she? I need her help right now." He looked desperate, very desperate. Pam was about ready to run for the back door. As she turned to make her escape, the short, round visage appeared in front of her, all dressed in blue. The healer. "Ah, Stanley, I thought I heard your voice. You look a bit upset. As upset as a zombie in a room full of mannequins. Come on back and let's see about getting you straightened out." The upset man looked better already. He followed the healer back to her room with hardly a sniffle. Pam waited until the door was closed and then quietly slipped down the hall and placed her ear against the door. From inside she heard, "So, Stanley, what seems to be happening now?" "It's the moon. It's out right now. I can feel it pulling on me, taunting me." "Now try to relax. I'll give you my extra special restorative process." Miss Blavatsky sounded just a bit unsettled, like she was being interrogated by the IRS. There came a howl from the other side of the door. Now, Stanley, you know you're not supposed to howl in here." This was followed by a growl, like a giant dog or worse, and inside one of the staff. The door suddenly swung inwards, causing Pam to fall forward. As she would have landed on the floor if not for Cassandra Blavatsky's backside. Pam was being pushed back into the hall as the healer was trying to slip out the door, still talking to her client. There came another howl. Pam wound up sitting on the floor in the middle of the corridor. Miss Blavatsky was now holding the door shut. "Now, Stanley, you need to control yourself. I can only do so much." The howl was followed by a crash, and then something began scratching at the door. Pam looked at the healer and then the door. What can I say? Stanley's a werewolf." Pam looked at the healer. She looked hard. She looked as hard as she could. Nope, wasn't joking. "Werewolf? What are you talking about? Your client is a werewolf? This guy in there is a killer that eats people?" "Oh, yes, but that doesn't make him a bad person." Cassandra looked a bit contrite. The scratching at the door was getting more intense. "We should call the cops." Pam pulled her cell phone out and began dialing. "Oh, no cops. We have a rule about telling on our clients." Cassandra was now holding the doorknob with one foot up against the jamb. Pam heard the phone ringing. She waited for the police to answer. After a few rings, the line was picked up. "Guten Tag." "Hello, police. We need you to come right away and bring lots of guns. Big guns. Really big guns." "Was machten Sie essen?" This sounded a lot like German or maybe Dutch. "Is this 911? Das ist der Schnitzelhausen in Friedberg, Deutschland." Pam hit the end button. Strange things indeed. Cassandra was working up quite a sweat, holding the door shut. She now had both feet propped up on either side of the door. Her rotund form was sticking straight out from the wall. "Quick! In the kitchen! Brown bag! Bring it!" The door shook and rattled. Pam ran to the kitchen and looked for a wished-for bag. There it sat in the center on the counter next to the ancient-looking freezer. Grabbing it, Pam ran back to where Cassandra was about to lose her battle with the door and the monster on the other side. Cassandra looked about done in. "Open it, grab a handful, throw them through the door." As she spoke, Cassandra got her feet on the floor. Now the door slammed open. Pam's hand came out from the brown bag, clutching a handful of dog biscuits. "Throw them inside." Pam chucked the dog treats into the room, right past the slavering werewolf. The wolf's head turned to follow the airborne treats, and then he turned and scampered after them. Now what? Pam was ready to make a run for the front door. Give me a hand. Get him on the table. In the middle of the room sat a pink massage table with a smiley face on either corner. Cassandra grabbed the werewolf by the arms, which was quite a trick since the werewolf was equipped with huge, long, sharp claws, and she didn't much want to get ripped apart. Pam got one foot in her hands and tried to lift the man-sized creature onto the healer's table. The werewolf was busy chomping down the doggy treats and didn't seem to much mind their efforts. His tail, which stuck out through the seat of his pants, was swinging back and forth like a pendulum. Cassandra said, "Rub his belly." "What? That's crazy." "Do it. It'll distract him." Pam carefully reached up and placed one hand on the fur-covered abdomen. She stroked his midsection. The werewolf's right foot started to gyrate just a bit. Pam tried scratching the thick fur. This got more dramatic response. The whole leg began swinging through the air, knocking the ceiling fixture about as it went. With the light swinging back and forth, Cassandra got busy waving her hands over the fur-covered form. She moved around the table, never touching the beast, but passing her hands through the air inches from him. Pam was still holding the one foot with her left hand, the hair-covered toes sticking out from the end of the shoe. Cassandra moved around the table, working her magic, her healing ability. As she went, Stanley slowly began to settle down, and his fur slipped back into his skin. As Pam watched, the werewolf turned back into a man. He began to snore. That was unreal. Pam sat down on the chair by the door. Poor dear, he doesn't much like being a werewolf, but he has no choice, and it's in his blood, literally. Cassandra took a seat right next to Pam. We found out he was a lycanthropist and didn't know who to turn to for help, and then he found us. Did you just make that up, lycanthropist? No, it's an actual word. Look it up. Cassandra wiped sweat from her brow. So what do we do with him now? He'll sleep for the next few hours and then wake up feeling like new. Cassandra checked a calendar hanging on the wall. I should have known. Full moon rose at 2 p.m. today. I thought that was all just Hollywood nonsense. Well, most of it is, but Stanley really believes the full moon affects him, so it does. He saw too many horror movies when he was young. You mean he only thinks he's a werewolf? Oh no, he's a full-blown loup-garou, which means wolf man, but he only knows what being a werewolf is by what he's seen on TV. So what do we do with him now? I keep healing him every chance I get so he doesn't kill anyone else. Cassandra thought long and hard about it. It's either that or I shoot him with that silver bullet I have. She looked over at Pam. It's kept in the top drawer of the fridge. You keep a loaded gun in the kitchen? No, just the bullet. I don't own a gun. I really should get one, but I just haven't the faintest idea which one I get. What size is the bullet? I don't know, about that big. She held her fingers apart a bit. First of all, you should get a gun that works with the bullet you already have. Pam knew something about guns. The bullet came out the end without a handle. Pam made an effort to stand up. Should I file a report on this event? Yes, but don't say too much about Stanley. Be discreet. Say he had an episode and he needed special treatment. And a snack. Pam sat at her desk. It had only taken her about 5.5 hours. She had accepted this as being her place of life, or at least until she could convince her folks this was a bad idea. Since she needed to make a report of some kind, looking at the typewriter, she wondered, how does it work? There was no on switch. She looked all around, but couldn't find the button anywhere. Come to think of it, there was no power cord either. Maybe it's battery powered. Pam pushed on one of the keys and nothing happened. She pushed harder and then harder. Suddenly there was a loud click and a piece of the machine jumped up and smacked the round black thing on the top. Forget it. Pam grabbed a pencil and wrote out in longhand paragraph describing some of the not very accurate details of Stanley's healing. Stanley what? She didn't know his last name. Now what? Pam looked around for some place to file the report. In the corner sat a wood-framed filing cabinet. The drawers were made of oak or something. Opening the top drawer, she found it was empty. So was the second and the third. The bottom drawer had some folders with yellow pages sticking out of them. Pulling out one of the files, she saw a date penciled in on the top. 1951? The files were a bit out of date. The phone began to ring, demanding her immediate attention. This is the bag company. What's up? You gotta help me. We accidentally unleashed a demon on the planet. This voice sounded familiar. Drake, is that you? Bob tried this same stunt earlier. Drake was one of the unschoolable Bob's hung out with. But you have to help. We have no one else to turn to. His voice sounded somewhat panicky. Something in it got to Pam. As she thought about it, she could hang up, pretend the line went dead, act as if she couldn't speak English, or she could ask what these boys were trying to get at. See just how far they were willing to go for a prank, and then turn the joke back on them. Okay, so if you really need the Bogus Anomalous Group's help, it will cost you... How much should she try for? See if these boneheads could cough up any cash. It will cost you $45 an hour beginning when you come in, plus expenses. She got that last bit from an old detective movie. Do I need to come by, sign something? Yes, you'll need to sign one of our contracts giving the Bogus Anomalous Group power of attorney and legal guardianship. Okay, I'll be there in a few minutes. The line went dead. Pam figured this would be the end of their silly game. Pam was more than surprised when Drake appeared in the driveway. I brought as much cash as we could scrape together. Bob is waiting in the car in case we have to run, and we don't know where Juan is. He's been missing all day and night. Drake pulled a handful of crumpled bills from his pocket and then a handful of change, piling it all in front of Pam. I hope it's enough. I think it's about $150. He kept looking over his shoulder at the door. Pam figured she'd make this painful for him as she could. She'd make him suffer. She'd make him sweat. She'd make him wish he'd never tried messing with her by making him think hard. So, you and your friends have unleashed a demon on the earth. You'll have to give me all the details. Drake started at the beginning, something about finding an old book in the junkyard. He told about some kind of a ritual they had performed in Latin. Wait, you read verses from a book in Latin not knowing what you were saying? Of course not. I'm not that stupid. Bob read them. I just made the fire and did some chanting and, well, I did spill some blood. You spilled someone's blood? By accident. I stepped on a nail and the blood got on the wood when I was making the bonfire. Didn't you ever read the B-movie survival guide? You're not supposed to read Latin or spill blood on anything, no matter what. No wonder you unleashed a demon. You're lucky to still be alive. She was going to make this guy wish they'd never tried to mess with her. So what can we do? Drake really sounded desperate. Good. Here's what we'll do. First off, you'll need to sign this contract. She pulled a bunch of forms she had found in the bottom drawer of the filing cabinet. They were actually the operating manual for something called a Singer sewing machine, whatever that was. Pam had drawn a few lines on them for Drake to sign. Sign here and here and here, and your initials here, and then sign here. Drake was having a hard time following instructions, but he scribbled his John Hancock in all the appropriate places. For $150, you'll hardly get a lot of action for demon eradication. We usually get at least $500 a day. She'd seen that amount in an old episode of the Rockford Files. $500 a day? Where are we going to get that kind of money? Well, maybe you could sell some organs. I don't own any musical instruments, let alone an organ. No, I mean as in your kidneys or maybe your brain. You should get a few hundred for it. It's never been used. Drake was actually considering. Pam started to wonder, just how far was this joke going to go? It's not a joke. What was that? Huh? I didn't say anything. Pam looked around, and she was starting to hear things. No, you're not hearing things. Pam fought the urge to look around. Okay, I'll see what we can do. Just don't read any more Latin texts and no more blood sacrifices, even if it is from your foot. Pam escorted Drake to the door. I'll be in touch as soon as we find out anything. Then, as the afterthought, she said, and bring me that book before you screw something else up. She tried to slam the door behind him, but it only closed part way. This is turning into one really weird day. Sitting back down behind her desk, Pam was about to get back up and go in search of some coffee when a strange, narcissistic female came walking from the coffee bar, still holding the mirror in front of her face. The woman made a complete circle as if admiring herself from all angles, but still just looking into the mirror. She turned and ascended the stairs, heading up to her office or some unknown destination in the upper reaches of the building. It was well past 6 p.m. before Pam was able to clock out, even though there was no time clock to out with. She grabbed her purse, slipped out the door, trying to close it on her way out. It stuck a few inches shy of closed. Walking quickly to her car, she clomb in and fired it up. This has been the weirdest day of my life. She wiggled the shift arm to get it into gear, and then backed out of the parking space and drove out the gate, even though there was no gate. It just a broken down fence. Her uncle had abandoned her to learn the job on her own. The telephone rang every few seconds. A werewolf had nearly eaten her. Well, not really, but close enough. Then that strange shadowy thing, and her phone was now giving her grief. And lastly, that joke with Drake and Bob. She didn't need this in her life. Pam asked as she was passing around the evening meal. Correction. Paula asked as she was passing around the evening meal. So, Pam, how was your first day at work? Oh, the usual. Wrestled a werewolf, signed a demon eradication contract. You know, the usual, she thought. Not much, answered the phone, filed some papers. Pam didn't think her folks would believe any of what had happened at work. And with that, I'm going to take a break. If you like what you've heard so far, I will be recording the next few chapters in a little bit. Until next time, this is Chris James for the Bag Company.
Are you coming to the tree where they strung up a man? They say murder 3. Strange things that happen here. No stranger would it be if we met at midnight in the hanging tree.